Hi there, my name is Lorna Baker and I'm a counselling psychologist in private practice in Cape Town. And today I'm speaking on anxiety as a part of the Joshua Generation series on helping others to stay headstrong. Now, as a psychologist, I've had an increasing number of people coming to see me concerning issues of anxiety in their lives, particularly through the whole pandemic and lockdown and the economic and social crisis that people are finding themselves in. And so I think it's important that as believers and as leaders and helpers that we have tools in how to work with people on a lay level and know when to refer them and be a part of the solution of helping us to alleviate anxiety in the body, in our midst. So anxiety is the body's natural response to stress and to threat. It's a feeling of fear or apprehension about something that's about to happen. And not only is it a feeling, but with it comes a physiological response of heart rate increasing, adrenaline running through our bodies, rapid breathing, sweating, and a lot of other symptoms that put us into fight and flight mode where we are alert and on guard for danger. Now, that's a normal response to a stress or a threat. And when that stress or threat is passed, then our bodies physiologically go back to normal and we can let down our guard again. And we all have experienced situations like that. For instance, when we're facing an important test or starting a new job or public speaking, or we find ourselves in a dangerous situation where we think something bad might happen to us. And so all of that response, stress response, which is a form of anxiety, occurs and then it calms down. Now, anxiety only becomes of concern, indicating underlying issues or a disorder, when the feelings become excessive or all-consuming and when the physiological symptoms begin to interfere with our daily lives. Then we need to look at our anxiety much more seriously. Anxiety can happen to anyone, and it's caused by a lot of factors. Now, sometimes there is a genetic factor involved where if you look at families that someone dealing with anxiety would report that their parents or their aunts or uncles and cousins also deal with anxiety, and it's run through the family. But there also are external factors and internal factors that come together to cause a perfect storm to find ourselves dealing with anxiety. So some of the external factors would be the normal or maybe not so normal stressors of life. So work stress, a lot of pressure, needing to perform in work, or your job being threatened at work can create anxiety for somebody where they feel a lot of pressure. School stress for a student who has to get good grades and needs to perform and maybe has a job on the side and there's a lot of pressure at home. And so they carry this stress and start to feeling anxious. Relationship stress where a marriage or a partnership or even our relationship with our children starts to really deteriorate, and it can cause a lot of anxiety. As well, financial stress, job loss, trauma, grief and loss. All of these are our outer external factors that can contribute to us moving into anxiety. As well, global concerns, so of the pandemic, where suddenly we are unsure about what is to come, the economic crisis and confusion and political crisis that's come along with it. All of these are external factors that will impact our body's ability to cope and can put pressure on our body and cause stress response and anxiety. Internally, there are also factors that are involved. And so for someone who's very chilled and very easygoing, they might not be as susceptible to stress. But if we are dealing already with issues of perfectionism and performance, I need to be perfect, I need to get things right, when suddenly we've got extra pressure on us externally, the ways that we normally cope aren't working anymore, and we can go into stress and anxiety. People-pleasing, sense of worthlessness, finding our value in doing well, and then now we can't suddenly. All of those things internally will also impact us greatly. We are seeing more and more people dealing with huge levels of stress that begin to show some of the internal cracks as well. And a lot of times people in these kinds of situations can't see a way out. And so anxiety and depression become issues that they're grappling with. And they really, really need support. And so we have an opportunity with those that are close to us and coming to us to be able to participate in the journey with them and offer tools and support for them to alleviate some of their anxiety. Now, there are different categories of anxiety as well, not just one form of anxiety. The DSM, which is a diagnosis, the psychiatric diagnosis of various types of anxiety, mentions quite a number, and I'll comment on some of those. The first one is generalized anxiety disorder, and that basically is a disorder where a person when that fight or flight adrenaline rush is there. It's like you're on high alert most of the time, so that anxiety is generalized. It's not a specific anxiety about a fear of spiders or a fear of being alone or a fear of failure or whatever, but there's a general anxiety through life. And they can never really come down off that high octane of anxiety, and it causes a lot of problems for them physically, emotionally, relationally, on many levels. The next one is a panic disorder, and that is when somebody has a panic attack. And a panic disorder often begins where the person seems very relaxed, so there's no problem. Suddenly they have a panic attack where out of the blue, their heart starts racing, their breathing starts getting really shallow and fast. They feel like they're having a heart attack. In fact, they even feel like they're dying and they don't know where is this coming from. And they go into full-on panic with no seeming reason. And yes, that panic attack does pass. And so then the body physiologically goes in high alert and then comes back. And then what happens is after one or two panic attacks, then they start having a fear about the fear happening. And so they get into a full-blown diagnosis of panic disorder. The next one is OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. And this is it's a type of anxiety where somebody will obsess. They'll have obsessive thoughts about something, and then they're trying to control something. And then in order to control the thoughts, they go into a compulsive behavior to try to control the thoughts of anxiety. And so you may see someone who, when they leave the house, there's a fear that something bad might happen, that someone might break into the house, and they think about it and think about it and think about it. And so to try to control that fear, they go around and they check the locks and they check them again and they check them again, and they get into a ritualistic routine where they may count, I have to do it 7 times and then I'm okay. And what that ritualistic compulsive behavior does is it helps to alleviate and control the obsessive thoughts. So you'll also have somebody who washes their hands obsessively or compulsively to manage that obsessive fear of germs or disease or whatever it might be. So that's quite a specific disorder as well. Then you have agoraphobia, which is the fear of large spaces. And often it starts just by somebody going out, and then something happens when they're out where they're fearful, and then they don't want to face that again, so they move away from that. And then eventually they give up all their, their playgrounds till eventually they're afraid to leave the home, and then they have a full-blown agoraphobia where they can't go out. Connected to that would be something like social anxiety disorder. And that's where someone is okay in a lot of normal situations, but as soon as they're put into a social situation where they have to engage with strangers or a large group of people, they go into high anxiety, which has all of those symptoms of heart racing, sweating, unable to talk, freeze mode. And it's a very, very painful type of disorder for people to deal with. The final one is PTSD, which is post-traumatic stress disorder. And PTSD is when somebody in the past has had traumatic experiences. And then now in the present, that past trauma is coming and invading the present through flashbacks, through panic attacks, through perhaps nightmares when they're sleeping, and they're almost reenacting some of the memories and even the physiological responses of when they had been traumatized. So often somebody who's been sexually abused, particularly with traumatically, if there's been violence involved with it or that sort of thing, they are diagnosed in the present with PTSD. So even getting close to, say, a husband or a wife can trigger that post-traumatic stress disorder. War vets often come home from war and they are diagnosed with PTSD, and very, very difficult to function normally with that. And there needs to be a lot of therapy around helping them to deal with the trauma that they experience. Now, to help people with anxiety, we need to understand that the physiological responses or reactions that the body is having they're the symptoms that in many ways cause a lot of physical problems. But besides just the adrenaline running and the cortisone, and then even the chemical imbalances that have come out of that, like with serotonin and your norepinephrine, that there are other aspects of our being that are impacted by the anxiety as well. And so we've got our emotions that feel like they're out of sync. And so with anxiety, with fear, with panic, with shame or condemnation or guilt, with anger, just feeling overwhelmed, feeling out of control, those take a real toll on us in the anxiety as well. And along with that come the thoughts. Things like, I'm not good enough, what's wrong with me, I can't cope, I don't measure up, my world may fall apart, I might fail, I can't deal with this anymore, I need a way out, whatever it might be. And so we've got to work with all of those aspects of the anxiety. On top of that, there's another area that I think is very key, and that is our ability, because we are highly escalated physically with the adrenaline, mentally, emotionally, on so many fronts. We're preoccupied. We don't know how to be. And I would say that preoccupation and just trying to manage that is keeping us from an ability to connect. So we're not connecting with ourselves. We're not connecting with our environment. We're not connecting with our loved ones. We're not connecting with the Lord. And we know that relationally, connection is impossible with somebody when we're preoccupied. And so when we're highly escalated, it's impossible to be present and to be logical and to be just engaged with them, because all of the energy is going into trying to cope with that. And so there really is, in helping people, there really is a part of helping people to come back into a place of being connected. Now, I want to say one thing about the physiological aspect of it, that when we go to see a doctor and they put us on some kind of medication, what they're doing is they're giving us either an SSRI or an SNRI to help to mediate the imbalance of serotonin and norepinephrine primarily. And so what that does is it prevents the body from absorbing more or too much of that to bring it back into balance, which then relieves a lot of the intensity of what we're feeling. And that helps a lot, but that's not always the end answer. And so I want to use an analogy. It's like driving a car. That when you drive a car and you see a crash coming, the first thing that you do is you take your foot off the pedal, but then you apply the brake. And so when you give medication to somebody, what you're doing is you're affecting the autonomic nervous system, the sympathetic part of the nervous system. Now that sympathetic part is what goes into fight or flight. And so the adrenaline gets released, the serotonin and the norepinephrine kick in. And so when you give, and it's like you stepped on the gas and you're revving. And so when you give serotonin or an SSRI or an SNRI, what you're doing is like you're taking the foot off the pedal. But you've got to do more than that. You don't just take the foot off the pedal, you need to apply the brake. And so when we work with the other part of the autonomic nervous system, which is your parasympathetic nervous system, which is the vagus nerve. What that does is that's like putting, when you stimulate that system, the vagus nerve, you're putting your foot on the brake. And so that's where things like meditation, like deep breathing, and I know we can be really poo-poo about those things, but there's something that actually really, really works in focusing on that aspect of working with anxiety. And so it's teaching people, because they don't know how to breathe, it's teaching them to slow down their breathing. And what it does is it activates the vagus nerve, which then brings a calm. And so people who practice the breathing, and that's not a new age thing, we learn to breathe. You know, God is the breath of life. And so we learn to breathe deeply and slow down. And then another aspect of that as well is worship. And so there's something they've discovered, that with the vagus nerve, one of the things that stimulates the vagus nerve is a low tone. And I think about the Gregorian chant and the church fathers and how their chants were meditative. And I love, like, sometimes I listen to them, they're so peaceful. And so, and I was also thinking, you know, if a baby is stressed and you want to calm them down and maybe put them to sleep, what do? You sing a lullaby. You don't sing a rock song and, you know, bash the drums or whatever. You sing a lullaby, and there's something about that melodious sound that just brings calm. And so what they found is that just let me do this, bear with me. So something like, there's something about meditative worship that triggers the vagus nerve. The vibration of it literally triggers the vagus nerve to activate it, to bring calm and peace. And so worship is a beautiful way. So I'm not talking like rock, like high praise. I'm talking about worship, that it helps to bring down anxiety levels. And so I think that can be very key. Now, the other thing that I think we have a great opportunity to impact people with is just being connected. And so because they're disconnected, it's working with them of connecting, being, drawing them into to relationship with you, where you sit and you be and you allow them to do that. And one of the key things that I have found effective is something that I actually got from the AA program with their 12-step program. And the first 3 steps, and what I love about those, and I won't get into those, but it's about learning. People need to learn to live in the now. And so to be present in the now. And I even see this is biblical. You know, the word says, do not be anxious about anything. Or do not be anxious about tomorrow, because each day has enough anxiety of its own, that we are called to live in today and not to be borrowing from tomorrow. And so with the 3 steps, one of the things that I've learned a lot from that is in order to be centered and to stay in today, even with the Lord, we have to close the door to the voices of yesterday. And that's condemnation, beating ourselves up, regret, unforgiveness, anger. It's like closing the door and saying, I'm going to live in today. And it's also closing the door tomorrow, which is anxiety. What about tomorrow? What if I do this? And saying tomorrow is tomorrow, live in today. And it's about living in the present, which really is about practicing the presence of God. You see, we can't practice the presence of God and be still in his presence while we're listening to the voices of yesterday and we're listening to the voices of tomorrow. So we help people to calm and close the voices and the doors of yesterday and tomorrow and learn to be. And that allows us, in practicing the presence, allows us to be and begin to hear God's voice. because we cannot hear him when we are highly anxious. Like, you can't ask an anxious person, well, you just need to read the word and you just need to pray, you just need to whatever. They can't do that, because as soon as they sit down and as soon as they're quiet, all those voices just start going and they can't hear God. We have to help people to silence the lies and the fears and the condemnation and be still in now. And it becomes an exercise of practicing the presence of God. So then when we help people to come to that place where they can just be and say, okay, God, today I turn my will and my life over to your care. What we're giving him is we're giving him all the stuff from the past. We're giving him all the stuff from the future. And we're saying, I'm not allowed to act on that. What I'm going to do is be here in the present, and I'm going to listen to you. And as I turn over, what I do is I start to hear your voice. And we move then from fear into faith. And so anxiety is all about fear. You know, if you really look at where the spiritual dynamics of anxiety really is rooted in unbelief. And that unbelief says, God, terrible things are going to happen to me and you're not going to be there. Like, that's what anxiety really is. And as we can say to the Lord, Lord, today I'm going to take all this stuff and put it into your hands and turn my will over, we move from a place of fear into a place of faith. And so we're teaching people and practicing the presence of God to be able to hear the voice of God. Now, what is faith? Faith is in the now. Faith is hearing the word. And with all the voices we can't hear. And as we give him a little bit of faith in now, then he can take it and he can work with us and begin to speak. And we've silenced the voices of fear so we can hear with the voice of faith. And then out of that place, we begin to walk in obedience to the Lord. So we really are helping people to come from frenzy, and busyness and all that entails, and come down into that place of being reconnected with the one who knows them and actually knows the way out of this anxiety. And they begin to listen to his voice and obey. And one day at a time, one step at a time, as they don't project into the future and beat themselves up from the past, they can start to make choices out of obedience that give them the confidence to begin to grow in God and come out of anxiety and make really good choices in God. And so the last thing I want to say is, in that place, in working with people, then we also can address the previous two dynamics, which are helping people to deal with their emotions and helping them to deal with their thoughts. Now, see, in order for them to be able to name the emotions, I mean, they can feel the anxiety and fear, but underneath they often can't get in touch with the loss and the pain and a lot of other things as well, and the anxiety. Then we teach them in the presence of God to bring the emotions, name them, bring them to him, and allow him to begin to deal with them. It's like we make an exchange. God, as I give these to you, I want to receive faith, and I want to receive comfort, and I want to receive hope from you. In the same way, we take the thoughts, the racing thoughts, the lies. God, you're not going to be there for me. God, I'm going to fail. God, I'll fall flat on my face. I'll never make it. And we name those things as words of fear, and we say, God, I want to lay them down to you and learn to take up words of faith, that God, you are for me, that you are allowing me to go through a dark valley, but your promise is that you will never leave me or forsake me. And it's not just an exercise in words and thoughts. We're doing it actually with the presence of the Lord with us and doing an exchange with him. So we're actually working with the power of the Holy Spirit and the power of the Word and the power of the presence of God to bring our hearts and our minds in line with him and then live out of faith. And for me, that what more could we do with people but to help them on that journey? And so I really want to encourage you that as a body of believers, with the power of the Holy Spirit, we've been given tools that are really tools of faith and tools of connection and being that allow us then to work with somebody as they slow down and can be present. And then in that place of being present can begin to name things and lay things down and make exchanges with the Lord. And so I hope that's helpful for you. But yeah, I think anxiety is a very real thing that we're dealing with right now. And I want to encourage you that as we look to the Lord and really allow the Lord to work with our own hearts, He gives us an ability to walk those things out with others as we come and be present to them ourselves and listen to them. So we're listening to the Spirit, and we're listening to the real cry of their heart to be grounded and connected and found and known and pursued. And then we walk with them. As we walk, we invite the Lord to join us on that journey to see them grow and mature. So thank you for your time. I hope it's been helpful.